Good day. We are the Study Wars. We are here to present our feasibility study on the addition of Modernized Jeepney in Balanga City as a step towards the PUB modernization program. Our presentation consists of background of the study, problem statement, objective and significance of the study, review of related literature, methodology, result and discussion, and lastly, conclusion and recommendations. The data shown in the figure above shows that the PUJ has the most number of trips in a day. Out of 179,000 jeepneys within the country, 90% of these are 50 years old or older. These old jeepneys are more prone to accidents, which could result to fatalities and damage to properties. In this table from the Metro Manila Accident Reporting and Analysis System, it is clearly stated that the PUJ is one of the major contributors to fatalities when it comes to vehicular accidents. Global historical CO2 emissions from 1758 to 2018. The growing numbers of vehicles also means that the global CO2 level is also increasing, which causes global warming. This graph presented the changes of emissions in million metric tons from 1758 to 2018. The data shown in the table represents the European exhaust emission standard that every vehicle sold must comply depending on their purpose. Problem statement. Deteriorating and aging parts of a public transportation unit could put the safety of commuters at risk. Even with the proper maintenance, the technologies of an old jeepney were outdated by today's standards, especially in pollution control. This study focused on determining the commuting and environmental effects of the initial implementation of the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program or PUVMP in Balanga City. We have three specific objectives. First, to determine the preference of the commuters, modernized versus traditional jeepney based on their age groups. Second, to evaluate the commuters' responses regarding their use of traditional and modern jeepney. And last, to determine the decrease in the amount of air pollutants up to the initial implementation of PUVMP.
Thank you, Mr. Tanglaw. Significance of the study. This study, if implemented, can improve the quality of life of riding public and can be a step towards the modernization of our transportation system. The outcome of this study will redound to the benefit of the commuters, drivers, operators, and future researchers. As per the commuters, the modernized jeepney will provide a bunch of features and convenience. One of them is by having a fixed time of arrival and departure. For drivers, if implemented, the drivers will be regularized by the government, having their fixed monthly salaries with the basic benefits. As per the operators, since jeepney drivers would have formal training conducted by the government, the entire jeepney industry would have a fleet of skilled drivers and knowledgeable with the proper road etiquette that may result in minimized road-related accidents. And lastly, for future researchers, this will serve as a reference for students who are taking up civil engineering that plan to make a study in relation to transport engineering. Review of related literature. The first article that related to our study is the lesson from jeepney industry in the Philippines. In this article, it concluded that the modernization of jeepney is necessary. However, refurbished Japanese engine will be used, which could not comply to the emission standard for PUJ. That's why, in this study, we will focus on the modernization of PUJ with Euro 4 compliant engine. The second article that related to our study is the impact of Euro 4 automobile emission regulation on the development technological capabilities in ASEAN. In this article, it concluded that the upgraded from Euro 2 to Euro 4 reduced the toxic sulfur that comes out of the combustion engine, and Euro 4 is heavily more stringent than the emission limit of Euro 2, which were implemented in the country. However, the most practical for trial of the socio-technical development for PUVMP is gradual and incremental change.
Thank you, Ms. Celeste. The third article that is related to our study is the characteristic of jeepney operation and demand in Metro Manila, Philippines. In this article, it concluded that the urban public transport system of Metro Manila provides reasonably high level of service standards for the country at the Philippine economic level. This is largely due to existence of widely developed and spread jeepney which do not receive any subsidy from government. And the last article that related to our study is DENR Administrative Order 2015-04. This article states that the implementation of vehicle with Euro 4 emission have limits and standards, according to Clean Air Act of 1999. Conceptual framework. The main concept of this study is modernized mode transportation. To make this concept possible, PUB modernization program would need to be implemented and steps like phasing out PUJ, mitigating exhaust emissions from PUJ, forming a cooperative for PUJ operators, and reforming the existing regulation for public transport will greatly affect the end result. Research gap. In order to fulfill the objectives of this study, we will firstly identify the respondents, which are the residents in Balanga City, using sampling technique. After that, survey forms will be distributed online via Google Form and online research will be conducted to compare the emission of old and modern jeepney. Lastly, we should already know or we will know the perception of the commuters on the current PUJs.
Thank you, Ms. Bernardo. Experimental design. This study was focused on the assessment of responses within Balanga City. The factors that could affect the outcome was considered as the independent, controlled, and dependent variable. The result of this study could be affected by two sources of errors, the multiple responses and the interest of respondents. Survey procedures and calculations. The first procedure is gathering of population census. The population of Balanga City was gathered from the 2015 PSA census. The data was clustered into 4 age groups, and the assumed population per strata were based also from the 2020 Philippine population of PSA. To determine the population for each age groups, the population of target clusters will multiply by the population of Balanga City. Next is calculating the number of respondents. The population of the target respondents was gathered from the sum of the population of their age groups. The number of respondents was calculated using the Sloven's formula. Last is the distribution of questionnaires on the selected respondents. The distribution of questionnaires was through internet via Google Forms. The first table shows the calculation on how we determine the estimated population per group age of target respondents, and then we calculated the number of respondents using the Sloven's formula with a % margin of error, and the last table shows the calculated number of respondents per age group.
Thank you, Ms. Camilo. So now, we are going to proceed to chapter 4, which is the result and discussion. As you can see in the slide, 10 Likert items are displayed alongside with their total average responses from 169 respondents. In this graph, showing the responses of the 4 target age groups, there were no significant difference in their perception for each item, except for the age group of 30 to 34. We use one-way ANOVA to test the independent and dependent variables for any significant differences on their means. We categorized the commuters by their travel frequency using MaxDip and tested the 2nd, 3rd, 7th, and 8th Likert item in our questionnaires. First is frequency of travel versus riding comfort, and it got a p-value of 0.069, which means their mean differences are not significant. The second one is between frequency of travel versus convenience, and it got a p-value of 0.093, which means their mean differences are not significant also. Next is the frequency of travel versus safety. It had a p-value of 0.208, which means that all of the target age groups almost had similar perception and MaxDip in terms of safety. Lastly, frequency of travel didn't affect how the respondent rated their travel timeliness that much, acquiring a p-value of 0.689, meaning that there were no significant differences on their responses. This study showed that based on the commuter's experience and perception, it can be concluded that MaxDip had a significant advantage due to its modern and updated features. That is what the commuters in Balanga City prepared. It can also be concluded that Euro 4 PUJ could numerically reduce harmful gas emission by half compared to the ones that comply with the standard of Philippine Clean Air Act of 1999. It is also recommended to dig deeper into the problems and issues that will be faced by drivers and operators when PUV modernization program will be implemented. Thank you for listening to our presentation.